from our science desk, also known as Nerd to Know. Well, some political observers have complained that there wasn't much substance to this week's Republican candidates' debate. It may be that substance doesn't matter as much as we'd like to think. A recent study from researchers at Yale University indicates that facts aren't likely to sway us towards one viewpoint or another. Instead, we humans go with our gut and rationalize around contradictory evidence. If the researchers are right, then the winning candidate will be the one who speaks to people's emotions and not their brains. In the current issue of Mother Jones magazine, science journalist Chris Mooney looked at why charts and graphs are less persuasive than old-fashioned charisma. Need to Know's Wynn Rosenfeld sat down with Mooney to discuss how our emotions are influencing our politics.
By now, we all know that May 21st was not the end of the world. But in the months leading up to that date, a small but vocal minority of folks was convinced that it would be. Believers like retired New York City worker Robert Fitzpatrick found any other outcome to be downright irrational.
Is there any doubt in your mind that tomorrow the rapture begins?
No, there's too many proofs. It's locked in.
But curiously, when May 21st came and went with the world still intact, seemingly incontrovertible proof that their prediction was wrong, church leader Harold Camping and many of his followers responded as if the rapture had in fact happened after all.
May 21 was a spiritual coming, whereas we had thought it was a physical coming, but he has come.
He said the rapture did happen, it was just an invisible rapture. And the world still will end on October 21st.
Author Chris Mooney interviewed dozens of experts on psychology, neuroscience, and sociology to find out why our beliefs so often don't depend on logical conclusions. What he learned left him unsurprised that Camping's clan stuck to that notion that the world was coming to an end. Because while that particular belief is definitely outside the mainstream, the reason why they hang on to it is not out of the ordinary.
People rationalize their pre-existing convictions about religion, politics, what have you, their identity through argument, and they think that they're being logical, scientific in their mindset, but they're really being more like lawyers, and they're really arguing to defend a point.
That tendency to rationalize rather than analyze is something psychologists call motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning tells us that our emotions kick in before logic does. So no matter how rational we think we're being, there's a very real chance that we're not doing anything more than justifying our preconceived beliefs. History is filled with examples.
May Day brings a wave of anti-communist sentiment as 100,000 march down New York's Fifth Avenue in a loyalty parade.
In the 1950s, Americans feared that the communist menace had infiltrated our nation.
One communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many.
And Senator Joe McCarthy claimed he possessed a list of communists working within our government. That claim set off a wave of accusations where thousands of American citizens were branded as communists or communist sympathizers. The problem, of course, was that nobody ever saw the names on that list. In fact, McCarthy never produced any evidence. But despite that, according to a 1954 Gallup poll, 50% of Americans still had a favorable opinion of him. Motivated reasoning had kicked in, and the Red Scare kept many Americans from needing anything more than McCarthy's word.
Politics has always been a very emotional realm, and the most successful politicians have obviously moved people's hearts more than their minds, or at least as much as their minds. The problem is, especially when emotion drives us to not accept the facts that are the basis of political decisions. Did climate change happen? Is it caused by humans? Were there death panels in the health care bill? Was the president born in the United States? These are matters of fact, all right? And we need to have that factual baseline in order to really deliberate and form consensus.
Let's take a big issue like climate change.
Sure.
The data seems so overwhelmingly unambiguous, and yet it's still very divided.
That's what motivated reasoning explains. That's what's so crazy and wild about it, is that if you are confident and you've spent a lot of time researching the issue, then you've assimilated all this information and you've made it fit your identity.
Motivated reasoning says that we will pick and choose the data that affirms our preconceptions. 72% of Democrats are worried about global warming, but only 31% of Republicans are. In fact, the single biggest factor for Americans when it comes to belief in climate change is party affiliation.
Parties are groups, tribes with which we affiliate. And so we judge what we think about a variety of issues based on the tribe.
For instance, those with liberal tendencies are generally more comfortable with more government regulation and federal intervention in business. So proposed policies like a cap-and-trade system or a carbon tax are more consistent with their worldview. Conservatives see the world differently.
Get your hands off of my marketplace. They've come to associate the idea that global warming is happening with the solution that we will impose upon the marketplace, and then they've rejected the idea that global warming is happening.
Are we doing this more than we used to? Is this becoming more prevalent, that we're sort of subjugating logic to our motivated reasoning?
I mean, I think we both have polarized politics that are emotional, and we have echo chamber effects for information. So I think that those are two things that exacerbate the situation.
And we can see the echo chamber effect in action. We have so many sources of news available that it's easy to stick to blogs, radio shows, and cable channels that conform with our pre-existing beliefs. But motivated reasoning doesn't depend on the mass media machine to operate. Everybody's doing it, all the time.
The idea is that everyone is susceptible to this, but it's not at all surprising to hear that we do this in our relationships, or in our personal lives. I mean, people rationalize staying in a failed marriage. People rationalize, oh, my kid isn't a bully. People rationalize, it's okay to keep smoking because I'll quit 5 years from now, but right now I need to, stay thin.
Is there an evolutionary reason that we do this? I mean, it seems like it would not serve us well to be acting illogically, but maybe it would?
We have evolved to be able to react very quickly. The reasoning system is highly influenced by the emotional system, and the emotional system acts first.
Our prehistoric ancestors were constantly faced with immediate danger, and acting fast was more important than thinking deeply.
And it makes sense that we would be able to respond quickly to threats, because this is self-preservation.
It's a process so deeply ingrained that many of Harold Camping's followers held on to faith even after waking up on May 22nd. So, if the continuing existence of the world didn't convince them to change their minds, what would?
I'm guessing that something that might work would not be someone like me coming in and telling them about how their brains work. They would probably find that offensive. Maybe, they're Christians, so other Christians who don't believe the world is going to end, coming and talking to them and affirming, we share this worldview, we have all these things in common, but you don't have to believe the world's going to end on a particular day in order to be a Christian.
It can be disheartening to think that logic and clear heads aren't necessarily the factors that prevail. But popular support for things like emancipation, universal suffrage, and the American Revolution came from stirring people's hearts as much as their minds. So a little motivated reasoning may not always be the end of the world.